He did not come to America. He came to an island off America. Vespucci came. Moderator for the program. We have two very special guests. One is Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, who is an African anthropologist, an educator, an author, and a scholar. He's on my right, and on my left is Dr. George Simmons. Dr. Simmons is also a professor. He was born in the St. Croix, Virgin Islands, USA. And we will discuss a number of topics this evening. These gentlemen are here to talk about African origins. As you know, in America, Black History Month is celebrated every February. Without further ado, let's get right into it, because I know they have some interesting viewpoints that will stimulate your thinking, even if you disagree with them or agree. I'm going to call you Dr. Ben. That's okay, because I understand that's what people usually call you.
Yes.
One of the more controversial positions that you take is that Black Africans landed in America 2,000 years before Columbus.
I would not specify the day, but probably exceeding 2,000 years.
You guys got sound this time? You got sound? No sound?
The fact is that Columbus never came to the United States of America or North and South America. He came as close as San Salvador. There's a rumor that says that Columbus came to America. He did not come to America. He came to an island off America. Vespucci came to America, not Columbus. He came to the Caribbeans. But it is commonly stated, just as much as they state, that Columbus discovered America while the Indians sat down watching doing it. Now, but all the knowledge of Africans in the Americas quite knowledgeable to scholars. The fact that it's suppressed doesn't have any validity at all.
Let me bounce a couple of things off of you. One thing, this article that I'm going to be referring to our home audience and to our studio audience, this article came out in the September 1981 issue of Science Digest, and it's entitled Black Kings in Ancient America.
Can you guys hear me?
And some other black scholars believe that these people, African people, came to this continent before Columbus.
We don't believe, we know.
How do we know?
The evidence is there. For example, when you go to Central America, the Yucatan Peninsula, and at Ecuador and places like that, they have caches of Carthaginian money found 200 feet down in the ground, meaning that there were pluvial disruptions, and those money was buried. So it indicates a period of time, at least from that, when you look at the strategy, you could tell the period of time in which they've been here. And when you're talking about Carthage, you're talking about at least 212 BC, when Carthage was finally destroyed by the Romans. Again, the Queen Makeda, which you call the Queen of Sheba, there are maps which Rome, the church in Rome, the so-called Holy Father, has suppressed these maps from the time of Justinian, showing South America and what is today called Central America. The maps there, and Victoria, Makeda goes back to at least 892 BC.
Before Christ.
Let
me point out another thing, just from the same article. I don't know if we can see this on television, but here is tell me what this is, and why do you see this as proof of the presence of Africans in America before?
That is the head of an Olmec, and the Olmecs were said to be the first of the indigenous Americans. And if an Olmec walked in here, then you would believe that he had come from the middle of Africa. And there is no doubt about it that all of the writers prior to racism admitted that the Olmecs were in fact Africans who had come across here. There is no doubt when Pigafetta and others, the point is that Van Sertima is writing and others, but Leo Wehner in 1938 at Harvard University wrote a 2-volume book for which he was fired about the Africans, Olmecs being Africans. And
let me bounce this off of you, okay? You take the same statue. You say that they're obviously black features, thick lips, broad nose.
The stereotype.
Okay, the stereotype. Other anthropologists say, I think Michael Cole was one of them. He says that this is not a black man. He said the people who made these statues, which I understand are 8 feet high, the people who made these statues didn't have sharp enough tools to give them white features, so they're not really black statues. They're white people carved with crude tools. What's your response to that?
It's strange that the tools were not sharp enough to make narrow noses, but it was sharp enough to put eyelids. So it would seem to me that an eyelid is harder to make than a thin nose. But Michael Cole is no less a racist than the head of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, what's the difference between Michael Cole, Reagan, and the Ku Klux Klan? It have the same philosophy. What is the difference between the fellows writing the Bible and write about the Queen of Sheba saying to Solomon, look not, ye daughters of Canaan, look not upon me because I'm black. My parents sent me the vineyard and that's all this nonsense. She's black because nature made her black. Her mother and father were black. That's why she's black. Had nothing to do with going in any vineyard, even though it's in the Bible.
Okay, you talked about religion. We're going to get to that in a while. Let me turn to Dr. Simmons. You also agree with this position that Africans were in this...
I have no problem, no doubt.
Why?
As a matter of fact, speaking about, like Dr. Ben mentioned, and you spoke about Michael Nico, I own a book several years ago and still have it in my possession by Michael Nico himself, who is considered one of America's leading archaeologists and anthropologists from Yale, one of America's most prestigious schools. In his own work, he referred to them as Negroid. And he went further to state the title of the book is America's First Civilization, what you call civilization. And to turn around and to tell these youngsters and other people in America in particular that the black men were the first to build any type of civilization in the Americas will be disturbing to Americans. And so...
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Even if you're right, let's say you're right, what difference does it make?
It makes a lot of difference.
What kind of difference?
It takes the inferiority complex out of the black man who felt that his only beginning and relationship here in this part of the world is that of slavery. Then it puts him in the driver's seat. Because, again, they don't tell you that there are man-made hills within the United States. They call them mounds. And they range from in the Midwest all the way down the eastern seacoast of the United States. And they are found artifacts in them that are similar to things found in West Africa and in Egypt, which is Northeast Africa, that predates the arrival of the so-called indigenous Indians to these lands. Another thing is some years ago, one of the major television networks back in New York, I don't remember exactly which one, ABC or which, I did a documentary, and they said that these Olmecs are the ones who brought right into the Americas about 3000 BC.
I gotta go back over this. These letters are actually white with a black
outline. They ought to
outline.
be glad to enter into these schools of higher learning today in order to read and write, because their ancestors back in Africa couldn't read and write. You can see what it will do to tell them that they brought right into the Americas. Antonio Pigafetta, that Dr. Ben mentioned, who sailed with Magellan when Magellan came to the so-called New World in 1519, when they landed at the land of Brazil, which we now call Brazil, they were met by people in canoes that carried as many as 40 people. And Antonio Pigafetta recorded that these people were jet black. It seemed that they came out of the infernal marshes. That meant that they were burned. He said, naked and black as they are in 1519, 27 years after Columbus's arrival to the so-called New World. Another thing they don't tell you, again, you heard my associate...
Why haven't we heard these things before? Why don't we read them in the New York Times, Birmingham News?
If I stole another man's country, and I brought your ancestors here to work for me, could I tell you how great your ancestors were and still expect to keep you in slavery?
Well, let me give you a better, not better necessarily, but an added situation of that. Most black people in Birmingham, Alabama, like in Harlem, New York, are Christians, and they go to in a black community, a black minister, a black congregation, but with a white Jesus, because they didn't know that that Jesus, up until Pope Julius II, had the first black Jesus painted. He had Michelangelo to do it, but up until that time, the world worshipped the black Madonna and child. The present Pope is going back to Poland
All right.
to worship at the statue of the Black Madonna and Child. That's in the New York Times. But what the Times says the next day, don't worry about the Black Madonna and the Child. She was originally white, but there was a storm in the 16th century, passed by and turned it black. But the same storm must have gone to Spain, and then it went to Ethiopia, and it went to the Soviet Union and turned all the Black Madonnas black. It was a hell of a storm.
Okay, let's get together here. I mean, we're jumping around, and I think we're going to have a beautiful, interesting hour. Okay. Because of this subject, I was going to get to this later, but since you opened it, let's deal with it. Okay. You're in the Bible Belt, gentlemen.
I heard so.
You heard so. And I must tell our audience, we had dinner together earlier, and we got into this a little bit. So you're going to hear some interesting things. Because you guys are taking issue with a lot of what we grew up with in the Bible as fact. And you tell me that's not so. You got to
It
fix
is.
that.
I brought it right here.
What is it?
Before I show you the picture you
All right.
wanted to see.
All right.
This is Pope Pius XII. In his private chapel, praying to the Black Madonna and Child, and all the popes of Rome,
Where'd you
in
get
their private, just from the church, the Roman Catholic Church itself. I just got rid of the copy of the history of the Black Madonna last night. I brought one copy. It's published by the Roman Catholic order of nuns called the Daughters of St. Paul. And they said that the picture of the Black Madonna and Child in Poland is reputed to have been painted by St. Luke. Now, St. Luke is said to have been one of Jesus' disciples. He ought to know what Jesus had looked like. So if he painted a black woman and child, who am I to say that he wasn't? Besides that, however, in Anacalypse,
So now you guys are saying Jesus is black?
we were saying that we have been written.
Up until the 19th in 325, when Rome, under the order of Constantine, the Roman emperor, ordered the 219 bishops at Nicaea, and they took away Christianity from the Africans. Just remember that before they said Jesus was born in a manger in Bethlehem, they said he was born in a cave in Ethiopia. It was at the Nicene Conference that changed that. Let's go further.
Wait a minute, let me be sure I'm following you now. You're saying that the birth of Christ, as we know it, is not accurate.
It's a farce. It was only
You realize what you're saying?
a farce, a lie. You know what a lie is?
A lie is a lie.
The person who wrote that at the Nicene Conference of Bishops in 325
AD. Motherfuckers don't know about that 325
Constantine,
AD,
the
boy.
Roman emperor, ordered a conference be held because Rome wanted to take over Christianity from the people who started it. Christianity was started with Pontius and Botius in a place.
Yo, Chappelle said, you know why I stopped doing comedy? I'm too good at this shit, man. I'm the fucking best at this shit, man. You know what? I'm so good at this shit. I write my jokes backwards now. You know, I just start with a punchline. Yeah, I got a fishbowl in my house just full of punchlines. You know, just random ones, and I just grab one at random and make it work. You know what I'm saying? I even got one tonight for this show, and the punchline is, so I kicked her in the pussy. Oh, the pimp breakdown? Oh yeah. Yeah. Yo, Chappelle is the man, yo. Chappelle is the man. And that shit with Monique mad because they didn't want to give her some meals or something. That's crazy. Oh man, these words are so small, dude. Alright, I gotta get this. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Chappelle is probably probably one of my favorite comedians of all time, yo. Yeah, Chappelle probably one of my favorite comedians of all time. Damn, it took forever for me to just even get the damn stream started. Now I'm running out of time. All I did was paint one of the shoes. I need to
Place called Alexandria in Egypt, and Egypt is in Africa. I saw it up to January the 9th. It was there.
You talked about that a little bit last night in your lecture. There was a lecture last night, Dr. Simmons, here on campus. You talked about the separation of people don't want us to see Egypt as part of Africa. You talked about the historical thing about blacks being in Egypt as well.
Yes, what I did last night.
I don't want to get away from the other point.
No, I just saying
Let's deal
that
with
what happened is that I dealt last night the fact that Herodotus, the institutions of higher learning, white institutions, considered the father of history. He himself, when he visited Egypt around 450 BC, almost half a thousand years before Christ, so that the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the people of cultures, which is part of present-day Turkey, were people of black skin and woolly hair. All right? And so I just want you to understand that the Egyptians we now see are conquerors, just like people who came here and took this land from the Indians, so that they're not indigenous to Africa, those who now rule Egypt. And Egypt is just as much a part of Africa as Birmingham or Alabama is part of the so-called United States.
Let me just be clear on this. So what you're saying to me now is that the people that we see, Sadat and all those guys, are not true Egyptians?
No.
The fact that
Sadat's mother was a Sudanese, Nasser's mother was a Sudanese, but their fathers were Arab conquerors. The one that was the African was Mohammed Naguib, the first president of Egypt, the one that overthrew Farouk. But 1 year after that, since he was looking for a hookup with the other Nile Valley countries as it used to be in antiquity, he was removed by the Arab conquerors. The Arabs didn't come to Egypt until 640. The first non-African people came to Egypt, otherwise called the Hyksos, in 1675 BC. The Africans there were already in the 13th dynasty period. They had built every pyramid you saw there before. They had done the S-turn in the Nile. They built every one of the major temples that had already been built, including the Grand Lodge of Luxor. The first European to come there did not arrive until the Greeks arrived with Alexander II, the son of Philip of Macedonia.
Look, I'm a college graduate. I never heard all this stuff.
Because they didn't intend to teach you that. They can't tell you that you're inferior and teach you that you taught Europe. The first Europeans to be civilized by the Africans were the Greeks. When you heard of Homer, the first European to have written anything, you couldn't miss that. They said that Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. And that was not until 833 BC. The Africans had already, in 255,000 at the Tassili Mountain, they had the Sibyllian period, first, second, and third, the pre-dynastic period, all the way up. The Africans had produced men like this, Imhotep, the multi-genius that designed the step pyramid of Saqqara, the first man to be a physician that even Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, is giving him credit and calling him the god of medicine. The Greeks changed his name from Imhotep to Aesculapius. There he is. There he is.
This gets into what you were saying. So wait a minute. You guys are telling me now that black men taught Homer and...
As a matter of
went
fact,
to Egypt to school.
As a matter of fact, the Egyptians said Homer was Egyptian, not Greek.
That's right. It's only the Europeans said that. The Westerners now said he was. But let us go back. Remember that Homer himself said in the Odyssey what? That the gods Zeus and Apollo, Europe's first gods, came from Ethiopia. Go read it, and I didn't write it. He wrote it. Thales, from Thales down to Socrates, and Socrates down to Aristotle, which they call the pre-Socratic philosophers and the post-Socratic philosophers, each and every one, including Plato, who spent 15 years in Egypt receiving their education.
You're saying Plato was educated in Egypt?
15 years.
See, what
Before that, you heard nothing of him. Every one of them.
What you have me believe then also, for part of what you said last night, is that Plato and these guys went back home, and they were big guys. But they were taught in Egypt? Is that what you said?
They came there
They came there for their education.
And they said it. They didn't hide it. It's the modern writers, the modern instructors and professors who are trying to deny it.
You can't have in a racist school in Birmingham non-racist education.
Let me get to something you said last night that's not going to make you very popular in this town and may not allow you to get safely out of town. You told an audience last night that you saw, I think, in a tomb in Egypt.
Yeah.
You saw it with your own two eyes, right?
Yes.
You told me that Moses, there were more than 10 commandments. Moses just took
42. The negative confessions. Moses isn't supposed to have been born until 1349 BC. The Africans were already in the 18th dynastic period. Akhenaten, who died before Moses was born, and Imhotep, who died more than 2,000 years before the birth of Moses, and others at the Grand Lodge of Mem had 42 laws called now the negative confession, one for each known. They go like this: I have not killed man nor woman. I have not spoken ill of the gods. Moses is supposed to be born in Egypt, they said, at a place called Sukkot. Already, it says that Moses got the 10 commandments of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is still in Africa, right? The Sinai Peninsula is a part of Egypt. More so, is it possible for Moses to be born in Egypt, educated in Egypt? At age 85, he's still in Egypt, and he did not learn the negative confessions? Is it possible for you to go to school, born in the United States, go to kindergarten, elementary, junior high school, and college, and never heard of the United States Constitution? Then it would have been impossible for Moses, when everybody had to read the negative confession 5 times a day, for Moses not to have seen those 42 laws and extracted 10 of them, leave 32 more. Now, if you could go to the temple of Setaiwan at Abydos, to go to the tomb of Ramesses VI at the Valley of the Kings, go to the temple of Edfu, where you would, by the way, see the story of an immaculate conception and a virgin birth 4,100 years before the Mary and Jesus story.
As a matter of fact, wait. No,
let me understand.
this is shocking.
Let me just put it in form of a question then. I mean, I don't want to stop this, because we're here for information. But what you're trying to get me to believe is that Moses didn't get the 10 commandments from Mount Sinai, but he got them
From his fellow Africans.
Moses was the high priest in Egypt, a high priest of the Egyptians in Egypt. Then what was he teaching? He wasn't a high priest of the Jews.
There were no Jews in those days. They called themselves. Remember now, there was no Israel yet. Israel is not until 1196. And when we to hear of Abraham, Avram as he was called, coming into Egypt, the Africans are already in Egypt, already in their 14th dynastic period when he shows up. All of the pyramids are built. That's another thing. Everyone, the 62 pyramids in Egypt were built before the first Jew was born.
Why was he fleeing from the Pharaoh?
Let me ask
What
you
was the
something.
charge?
I can write anything when I want to write, you know. Who's going to stop me from writing if I got the power?
I was about to ask you, what kind of trouble do you get into for holding these kind of views?
Oh, the other day, a black sister spat in my face, and because she couldn't take that. She couldn't take that Jesus was black. She said, no. I mean, he had no color. If he didn't have no color, how John the Baptist saw him to baptize him?
Do you realize that you're getting at the foundation, that you're shooting and digging away at the foundation of what most of us grew up believing?
Yeah, well, we believe a lot of things for a long time. One time they give us 3 pages in the Bible. Slave, obey your master. And that's what we believed for the longest time. They said that Jesus said, so how would Jesus, who fought the system, said to the slave, obey your master? It didn't sound rational, would it? So, look, most of the things, we're in a European system. You could come to this university and spend 4 years, go back and spend another 2 for your masters, and another 1 or 2 for your doctorate, and never had any course at all about Africans. But every day you come here, you got courses about Europeans. This is an extension of European culture, European belief, European racism. And It has no intent of teaching about the Africans. The Africans built the Europeans' first university, the University of Salamanca in Spain. These are historical records. It's just like...
Okay, one of the things you said last night is that it's not just black people who are saying these things.
No, most of this information are written by whites.
In white books.
It's just that they don't emphasize it in the classroom. As a matter of fact, let me back you up when you open up the discourse. We were speaking about Columbus. None of them in here, none of the listening audience, even in the air, had the faintest idea that in the life of Columbus, when after his death, his family had to go to court because charges was raised, and this is in the record in the Vatican, in the secret archives of the Vatican, that Columbus was shown a map of where the Queen of Sheba that Dr. Ben spoke about, this black woman who had mated with Solomon and produced the son, Menelik I. And they lived more than 900 years before the birth of Jesus, had already sailed through what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, came to lands to the west that was longer than Africa and Europe combined. And that, brother, is North, South, and Central America.
May I add this? Right here at this university they teach, and I've just been here a few days, right? A day. They teach in this institution because it's the same as Cornell anywhere, that Hippocrates was the father of medicine. He's not until 333 BC. Let me read this for you.
Okay, you teach at Cornell, is that?
I teach at Cornell also.
They let you teach this kind of stuff at Cornell?
They teach it now, I'm there.
Okay.
1700s, in 1700 BC, that's 1400 years before Hippocrates, you can find the Kahum medical papyrus is paper.
Okay.
A compendium of information about women's diseases and pregnancies. In 1600 BC, that's 1300 years before Hippocrates, the Edwin C. Smith Papyrus, a comparative surgical text and anatomical inquiry. It especially deals with the spinal column. 1550, let me drop to one here. The Ebers Papyrus. There is the whole book on it. A medical paper by Queen Hatshepsut, the first known queen in history, an Egyptian queen. A papyrus designed to show women how to develop a method to stop pregnancy, to insert into the vagina, made of the shrub of acacia and honey, which break down into lactic acid. Not only that, Monsanto, DuPont.
So we're talking about birth control.
Birth control in 1550 BC by the Africans.
It's a long time before the pill.
A few days before.
But keep in mind, however, keep in mind that Europe is not yet in history.
European history.
All I ask one at a time.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead.
The civilization began. Homer, I'm not written his Iliad and Odyssey. And the hero.
Okay, all the stuff that you're saying we can find this.
Look, I have nothing to say. If it's not here, it's either in Doc's library or mine back in New York. Nothing we take for granted.
Or the books that we brought down.
And you said they're not all written by black men?
No.
Anacalypsis
Anacalypsis is written,
okay.
Look now. Okay. Anacalypsis is a 2-volume work by Sir Dr. Higgins, written in 1838 in England and published by Watson Company. The Golden Bow is a 13-volume book by Sir James Fraser, published simultaneously in the United States and England, and it was published in 1938. Bible Myths and the Parallels in Other Religions, written by Thomas W. Downes, and is published in 1887 by Watson Company, London, England. The Ruins of Empire by Comsey Volney is published, there it is. It's published in 1792 by simultaneously in England and France, done by a man who was with Napoleon Bonaparte.
Let me just say this about that. If we just give you the benefit of the doubt and consider what you're saying to be true, I mean, you are chipping away at everything we've ever been taught, most of what we believe.
But you were taught it as slaves. Nobody.
Slave in 3 pieces?
Yes. We are no longer physical slaves, but we are mental slaves. And this is the worst form of slavery. Some of us believe that the Cadillac and the house on the beach makes us free. But it's the mind that makes us free.
Well, I'm just glad I have to ask the questions and don't have to defend any of this stuff. Go into something else for a minute. Tell us about some of those pictures, because I'm going to much into this hour.
Well, this picture that you were looking at right here is the picture of Pope St. Peter the first pope of Roman Catholicism, as the church admits.
But this
the
man
church
has a black
said that
face.
black face, black everything.
If you strip him, he's black all the way down except his fingernails and all those things like that.
Well, how do I know you just didn't get a picture and paint a black face on it?
No, that is a statue in Rome. That you're
Now?
looking at now.
Now at the
Take
Basilica.
a jet.
Can't afford it?
Take the fastest means and go to Rome and
You'll
come
see him
back
right
and
there.
then tell us if it's not. That same picture, I used to teach at Roman
You said, wait a
Catholic
minute,
College.
this is there now?
Yes, now.
With
And
the black face?
every pope
Has
kisses
to kiss his feet.
Every pope kisses his toe. They said his toes are worn by the thousand kisses placed there. If the book that I got it from was not that heavy, I'll bring it that you see the Pope kissing Pope John the 23rd.
And
kissing
who is this black guy?
Saint Peter.
The man that they told you, every black minister, every white minister says, Jesus gave Peter the keys to heaven, which means that no white man, nobody else could enter into heaven unless he come by way of me, the black man. But I hold the keys to heaven.
Right. And there's no reason why Peter should not open for me. He suffered too then.
What else you got there?
Well, what I have here is some black saints. St. Augustine, some of you say the St. Augustine, St. John Chrysostom, St. Athanasius, and St. Ambrose. Black saints of the church. You have to remember that Christianity is called in Europe and by Europeans as the new religion.
Right.
It was alien to Europe. Emperor Constantine is the one who decided to take it. He said, I need a religion to unify my empire. With this religion, I could then conquer the world. And he himself was never a Christian until on his dying bed in the year 337 when he became converted to Christianity. But he took it to unify his empire.
But isn't it Augustine in his unchristian doctrines? He wrote 48 different works. The three most noted in the West is his Confessions, which he specified who he was, and then the Holy City of God, and the last was on Christian doctrines, the fundamental principle for modern Christianity. Three black women, Felicita, Perpetua, and Nymphana, were the first to die for Jesus Christ. Next, and they were from what is today called,
How do you know this?
it's in the documents of the church. And it's in the writing of the church. And was it not Pope Melchizedek, the three African popes of the Roman Catholic Church, Melchizedek, Victor III, and the other one,
Galatius.
Oh,
Galatius.
Galatius. We have them there. Now, these are church documents. But remember, when it became a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain, the Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S. From 711 until 1485, 774 years, when we built and brought into Europe the university system, building the University of Salamanca, S-A-L-A-M-A-N-C-A in Spain, a copy of the University of Genève from ancient Ghana, which was equally a copy of the University of Sankore in Tombouctou, which the French later called Timbuktu. Now, these look, if you want to read it, read Stanley Poe's The Moors in Spain, written in 1887, or Alejandro Matalla. Read his book in Spanish, The Moors in Spain, and said that even the bath was introduced by those Africans.
You said the bra was introduced by...
The bath was reintroduced because Rome had a bath before, but they stopped because of not understanding the Christian doctrine that the Europeans had embraced. They stopped for over 1,000 years from taking baths. Matter of fact, I'd like to make matter of the fact that the Queen Victoria of England boasting of herself being the cleanest woman in all of Europe, taking one bath per month. People made saints for boasting and never even washed their hands. Saints of the church.
Do you have a copy with dirt with you?
No, I didn't bring too many.
Okay, let me, because you guys are bombarding us with so much. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, my name is Joseph Ben Yekenen. I teach at Cornell University History and Egyptology. I'm an author, former member of the United Nations, graduate with a PhD from Cambridge University in England, a PhD from the University of Barcelona in Spain. That should help. I originally was a civil engineer who turned to anthropology and history with a law degree and practiced law. Now, black people had to know a little bit more to get a job. And I was born in Ethiopia and came to the Caribbean as a young fellow at age 6. My mother's a Puerto Rican, and we lived and grew up in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. My father was a barrister. And I, as I said, worked with the United Nations, and then finally started teaching at Columbia University and other places. Got fired a number of times, of course.
I would imagine so.
So yes, with this kind of thing, they don't want, with the documents in my hand. When I exposed that Planned Parenthood was nothing new, that it was done in Africa as early as 1550, I was fired on the spot by Professor Ralph Linton. But about 10 years later, the American Medical Association published the Ebers Papyrus, the same thing I got fired for.
Okay, I want to get back to something in one of your books in a minute, but just tell us, our audience at home and studio audience, a little bit about yourself, Dr. Smith.
Oh, I'm not as fortunate as Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben is the intellectual. So I like to be the other extreme. I like to say that my college is that of hard knocks. And I use myself as the example as to how high a black man could come from mother wit. Mother wit in the sense that it is said that blacks are not intelligent. And so that what we do is complement each other. He being the extreme with all the degrees, and I will remain the little fellow in the street. However, the little fellow in the street have taught at some of your best colleges and taught the professors so that they could teach you. I've taught at Marist College. I've lectured for Yale. I have lectured in most of your best institutions. I just went to do a week seminar out in the state of Washington to educate some professors how to teach in teaching and teaching logic. I think what happened, like some people say, well, Simmons, why don't you go and get the thing? I said, no, at my age, I'm not looking for prestige, but my children will. And since there's a thing that black people are dumb, I like to sit back being dumb and just waste the intellectual other folks away.
Well, he's been very modest.
I'm looking for that.
He's my associate in my office.
That's all right.
And yes, and at Malcolm King College, and was the chairman of the Department of History in many schools, so he's been modest.
Let's get back to some of this. Let me see that for a minute. Let's get back to some of this stuff we were talking about last night, you were talking about at dinner. You guys just took on the Bible. And
which one? There are many Bibles. You got about 3,000 versions. And the one that most people here believe in is the King James Version. And when a version is not a fact, a version is something like the original. And James commissioned 47 men under Sir Francis Bacon. He pulled them from Cambridge University, Oxford University, University of Eton, and University of Scotland at Glasgow. Those 47 men wrote God's words.
You're not going to be very popular in this area.
I didn't plan to be.
Okay. This quote from one of your books, and this will be available to our studio audience, and we'll talk about this a little bit after we get off the air. And I'm not even sure I should read this. This is from the Bible.
That's the Bible in this. You should read it. Read what was in Genesis up until the 6th century. It is still in the Book of Mormons. That's the people in Salt Lake City, which many blacks have joined because they'll join the Ku Klux Klan as the open membership. It is still in the Calvinist teaching in South Africa, and read what was in the Bible up until the 6th century.
So you're saying that this is still in the Mormon Bible?
It's still in the Mormon Bible. It is still in the Calvinist Bible, and look at the bottom where the Roman Catholic Church had it, and they're now making an excuse that they were sorry that it was ever in there, but nevertheless it was.
All right, let me just share this with our audience here and our audience at home. And this is from one of Dr. Ben's books.
And from all the books, that it's on page 120 and 21 in that book.
Let me just share a little bit of it here, because I want to get some reaction from you, and it's something for folks to think about. And you said this is from the Bible. Therefore, it must be Canaan, your firstborn, whom they enslaved. And I'm just starting in the kind of the middle because there's a lot of it here. And since you have disabled me, doing ugly things in blackness of night, Canaan's children shall be born ugly and black. Moreover, because you twisted your head around to see my nakedness, your grandchildren's hair shall be twisted into kinks, and their eyes red. Again, because your lips jested at my misfortune, theirs shall swell. And because you neglected my nakedness, they shall go naked. And the rest of this stuff is underlined, and this is a quote from the book. Bible.
And their genitals shall hang to the earth or some shit
And
like
their
that.
male members shall be shamefully elongated.
Elongated.
Men of this race are called Negroes. Their forefather Canaan commanded them to love theft and fornication, to be banded together in hatred of their masters, and never to tell the truth.
That's right. It was in the Judeo-Christian Bible until the 6th century of the Christian era, also called AD, Anno Domini. And some black ministers refer to it. Just a few weeks ago in New York, I was listening to my radio on one of these religious programs sponsored by a liquor store. And it says, the minister says that these young blacks are acting up. We shouldn't act up anyhow, because when we die and we go to heaven, we're going to be white anyhow. So we say anything. Remember that we did not know that Christianity came from Egypt, Egypt, and that the first monastery was on the island of Philae, which is still there now, and that the Christianity went into Ethiopia and all of North Africa, where they had 7 patriarchs and 27 bishops before the first one in Greece or Rome. We knew nothing about that. We didn't know. Up to now, you got black people sending missionaries to Africa, not knowing that the Coptic church is older than the Roman church. We still send missionaries. We still tell lies about Africans eating the missionaries. I wish we did eat the missionaries, then we would have had no problem. But we still got that. We still got roots. People thinking that roots has something to do with history when the man says a novel. People naming their children Kente Conte and Conte Kente and all kind of thing now. But these are people.
You take issue with that? You find something wrong?
Yeah, it's garbage. It has nothing to do with history.
Are you calling
it's a novel.
Roots, the most popular television show in the history
Amos and Andy was the most popular radio show. And it had nothing to do with black people, with 2 white Jews. You know, I've told you, the worst part of us enslavement is not the shackle on the hand, it's the shackle on the mind. What we have been conditioned. Look, remember this, that the slave master doesn't train his slave to be free. We once used to train ourselves when we had such things as the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Baptist Church, the African newspaper. Frederick Douglass, Nocturna, Denmark-Vesey, and all these different people had churches where they taught the people their own history. Look, go into our churches and find out, do they sing the spirituals anymore? No, they got anthems from Scotland, from Germany. They don't sing the songs of the African people anymore in the churches.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that? How does a song from Europe, from Scotland relate to you? You Scottish? You could have fooled me. But you see, this is the whole.
Suppose that we just, not all of it, just suppose we believe half of what you said here tonight. What difference is it going to make?
Quite a lot of difference. Your behavior, the behavior of the child. If you tell a child that all his ancestors and all his people before him ever was, and you prove it to him by not showing him anything that his people did, why would he feel good? When you got busing now, everybody been fighting for busing. So the bus goes, you show me one bus bringing one white kid.
All right.